Hey guys, welcome to my first Patreon tutorial. Okay, I got this. Welcome to my first Patreon tutorial video ever. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to use Operator. That thing down there, that's Operator. You will find it in every copy of Ableton, I think. It is an FM synthesizer, so what that means is it does frequency modulation. You take the A wave and then modulate it with a B wave and get a whole new wave. How Operator works is you have 4 different oscillators, A, B, C, and D. Just by clicking in the area, and then you're entering the envelope and oscillator settings of each of these oscillators. Just a quick kind of rundown on the oscillator part. Here you can actually draw in the harmonics. So what these harmonics are is that they are sine waves, and they are represented at different sort of frequency points relative to the fundamental, which is here. This here is the fundamental frequency. So what that means is that that is like the root note of what this instrument, this sound is. That will inevitably determine the key of the sound, if you like. But we can use any different combinations of harmonics to achieve different timbres and sounds. For example, here we have a sine wave represented with one fundamental frequency. Well, one fundamental harmonic or whatever. But and as I play it here, it's a sine wave. And then if we get a saw, that's represented with all the harmonics. And then square would be all the odd harmonics. You could also control how many harmonics you want to have control of. So you got 16, 32, and 64. It doesn't really matter like which one of these you choose to use. I mean, I usually just use 64. I usually don't even try to get too complicated in this section because I feel like you can very easily muddy up a sound. But do experiment with it and give it a try. You could also see how this interacts like visually as a wave here. So you can see like what that looks like as an actual waveform when you're creating the oscillator. In each of these oscillators you also have an envelope. And in an envelope you have attack, decay, release, and sustain. If all of this looks a bit too crazy, you can also just like click and drag these little squares and they will control the enveloping. Controlling the envelope in the oscillators will control how the sound moves. Enveloping is also very crucial when it comes to FM because you're then controlling the movement of the FM onto another oscillator, and it would sound something like this. So on the second oscillator, I've just set a saw wave with a coarse of 9. Using the coarse knob, you can control essentially the harmonic relation to the fundamental frequency of the synth. So in that case, here on this first oscillator, we have it set to 1 because this is the fundamental frequency. It's just a sine. But then on the second oscillator, we have a saw, and we are pitching it up essentially, and then FMing it. I find that to get those really like cool sort of like dubstep-y sounds, if you take like a really high saw or like a higher or even just like a slightly higher pitch oscillator and modulate that to just like a sine or something, you can get really cool results. For example, and then after some multi-band compression, put some disperser maybe. When you're using Operator for dubstep, or I mean if you're using Operator at full stop, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be really, really, really simple. So always try to like simplify how you use Operator. Do experiment, play with all the oscillators, but for me, I usually just use A and B for the most part. So On each of the oscillators, you have fine knobs, and just like the coarse, this does change the pitch of the oscillator. This can help you basically just fine-tune the pitch. In Ableton's Operator, you have an LFO, which is a low-frequency oscillator. What this essentially does is control movement of different things in the synth. It essentially gives you the ability to modulate anything within Operator. With the LFO in Operator, we have two destinations. The destination A focuses on LFOing the A, B, C, D oscillator pitches and the filter cutoff. So you can see that represented by A, B, C, D, and fill for filter. So when we turn this to 100% and we can set this to low, turn the rate around here, we can hear what that does to the pitch. Turn off the LFO on the pitch, and then just maybe put the filter frequency around sort of mid here. Maybe if I pull this down a little bit lower. To demonstrate the LFO a little bit better, I'm going to turn off oscillator B real quick and just go to oscillator A, and we'll make this a square wave. And we'll just quickly turn off these effects. When we assign the LFO to the filter by clicking here on the destination A, and then turning down the frequency of the filter to about 200-300 Hertz, we get a basic wob. That's how the LFO works. It just basically controls the the movement and modulation of different settings in the synth. It will create movement in your sound, and yeah, use an LFO today. The filter section of Operator also features an envelope just like the oscillators and also the LFO. In the filter section here, this is basically giving us a visual representation of where it's filtering the sound. So in the filter, we have a couple different settings. So we can actually change the shape of the filter. We have a low pass, which sounds like this. I have a high pass, which sounds like this. So that actually focuses on cutting off from the low end up, rather than low pass where you're just kind of cutting everything below, if that makes sense. You've also got a band pass and a notch filter, and you've kind of got this other one which is like it's like a custom filter thingy. You've also got a shaper section, which this is basically distortion that will be happening before the filter. Now here we've got 4 settings: soft, hard, sine, and 4-bit, and they will sound like this respectively: soft, hard, sine, and 4-bit. For all of these, you can actually control the shape drive. You can actually LFO this as well. Sine shaping is really nice for sub stuff. Hard and 4-bit are really nice for like really hectic kind of dubstep sounds. 4-bit's really good too if you turn up the resonance here and then kind of bring the frequency a little lower. And now we have this really cool sound. Try to make a really simple synth so that then you have lots of room to put heaps of crazy effects on it afterwards. Here I've just quickly done this EQ movement just because I really like the way this sounds, and it kind of like almost has like a growl sort of vibe to it. It's like, or like it kind of sounds like a voice. And what you can do for operator bass is to kind of give that like that like they almost have that vocal quality to it. You can get an EQ and start shaping out how you want that to then move. So you can essentially get an EQ and do shit like this. You can go to about here with a band part, like a shelf, and then move the scale up and down and automate this. I'll actually be going over this a little bit more in depth in another video very soon. And then maybe we'll turn on this processing. That sounds really cool. In this section of operator, we have the pitch envelope, the spread, and the transpose. The pitch envelope is essentially just an envelope that controls the pitch by default. But you can actually set this envelope to anywhere where the LFO can go as well. So here, if I just set the wave to square, and then turn on the pitch. So that's the kind of sound you get when you turn up the pitch envelope. You can control, again, ADSR, the attack, decay, sustain, and the release, playing with the settings here. You can also control the curve, or the slope of the enveloping, by clicking these little fellas here. Cool! We've also got a spread knob. I never use this knob. You probably shouldn't use this knob. It's not really a good way to get the stereo Haas effect or whatever. I would only use it if you're going to do, for example, something like this. So if I get an operator and we get a square wave and then we turn up the spread, sounds like that. Now if I make this mono, you can hear it's like phasing heaps. Now you can use this phasing to your advantage though. So like without it sounds like, and then with it kind of gets more phasey. So you can use it as a legitimate phasey effect if you like, but I would avoid it if you're trying to get a cleaner sound. The last section I'll be going over in Operator is the time, tone, and volume section here. This also has a routing part in this section. Now you're probably thinking, when I just clicked here, you're probably going, what are all these Tetris fucking shapes? They are the algorithms, or routing. I would just call it routing usually, because essentially it's determining the path of where what oscillator modulates what. By default, A is modulated by B, B is modulated by C, and C is modulated by D. But you can actually send this into a bunch of different directions, or even have two different FM signals in parallel to each other. But you can also have them all run in parallel and not FM each other. Now this is really handy if you want to use Operator and make some probably more like melodic or nicer sounds where maybe the emphasis isn't actually on FM synthesis. And that's actually where sometimes I'll actually use Operator for that and not so much FM bass design. The two algorithms that I use the most are this one and this one, because I find that I don't ever really want to do anything more complicated than FMing one oscillator by another. But also, I like to then use Operator, where I can get each oscillator and then just have control of it. There's a lot you can do with just one or two oscillators in Operator. As well, there's a time knob, and what this does is just control the timing of everything going on in the synth. This is actually really, really cool to automate and play with, so have a play with it. Operator also features a tone and volume knob. I usually don't really play with these too much. Maybe the volume if I want to like really crank up the sound or clip it. Tone is meant to sort of control like the higher frequencies that can cause aliasing. I usually just leave the tone knob at a default 70%, but have a play with it. I think the most important part to keep in mind with Operator is to have fun and have a play with the synth. That's it for today's tutorial. Thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing to my Patreon. if you are on my Patreon and watching this video, you're awesome.